My BIL lectured me for 4 minutes about the importance of history because I got one question wrong after dinner. I absorbed it and went to the spare room. 2 days later, from the background of a phone call, he made another comment. I said something I can't take back. AITA. I need to ask Reddit something, and I need you to be honest, because my family is currently calling me jealous, cruel, and out of order, and I'm sitting in my flat trying to work out where the line actually was. Let me give you the full picture. I'm 26. My brother-in-law is Arnold. My sister is Tina. They have a 5-year-old son named Arlo who is completely delightful and has nothing to do with any of this. I was on a week's holiday staying with them, their house, their rules, their routine. Arnold works in the government sector. He got the position through compassionate recruitment after his father, who was also in the sector, passed away in service. He said so himself and continuously glorified it by saying that he stuck with that job, and if he did pursue something else then he'd be better off. I want to say this clearly because it becomes relevant later, and I want you to have the accurate version rather than the version that makes me look worse than I was. He got the job through a legitimate process. The position exists specifically for families in that situation. I have never begrudged him the job. What I have found increasingly difficult is what he does with it. Arnold is not a bad person. I want to say that too because I've been sitting with this for 3 days, and fairness matters when you're telling a story about real people. When Arlo was born, he was up at every hour. He took Tina for dinner on her birthday without being reminded for the last 6 years. He fixed my mother's boiler last winter when it went without being asked, and without mentioning it afterward, which is frankly more than most people do. He's a decent man who lets the job go to his head. That's the most accurate description I have. The comparisons have been running for about 2 years. Not constant, that would be easier to address. Intermittent, the specific frequency of something that happens often enough to establish a pattern and infrequently enough that each individual instance can be dismissed as nothing. The comments about stability, about government benefits, about security, delivered in a tone that isn't quite boasting and isn't quite informing. Something in between that sits in your chest without giving you anything clean to respond to. I've absorbed them for 2 years, for Tina, because she's happy and because Arlo is 5 and because I'm not there often enough for Arnold's ego to be my daily problem. This week it became my daily problem. The question came on the 3rd day of the holiday. We were sitting after dinner. Arlo was asleep. Arnold was talking about what I honestly can't tell you because I'd been half listening, the way you half listen to a conversation that doesn't require your full participation. Then he turned to me and asked me something about a date, a historical one, something about a political figure and when something specific happened. I didn't catch the full question. I wasn't paying attention, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What I gave him was a vague answer because I didn't know and wasn't particularly invested in knowing. It was wrong. He corrected me, fine, then he didn't stop at the correction. He went into it, the importance of knowing your history, the value of education beyond just getting a qualification, how these things matter, how a person who's been through as much schooling as I have should have this kind of general knowledge. It went on for about 4 minutes. 4 minutes of a man who asked me a question I wasn't ready for, got a wrong answer, and decided that wrong answer was evidence of something worth lecturing me about. I said very little, something non-committal. Then I said I was tired and went to the spare room. I lay there and I felt the specific heat of something I've been feeling for 2 years at low temperature suddenly running high. Not anger exactly, something more total. The accumulated weight of comparison and comment and the specific condescension of someone who has decided that their position entitles them to assess everyone else's. I didn't go back out. I wasn't going to say anything I couldn't take back with Arlo asleep down the hall and Tina in the next room. My mother called the following morning. She'd spoken to Tina. She'd heard about the question and the wrong answer, and had been given some version of the evening that I don't have full visibility of. What she wanted to do, with the specific warmth of someone who thinks they're helping, was discuss it with me. The discussion took about 2 minutes before it became something else. The something else was the familiar thing. How Arnold had done well for himself. How stability was important. How some of Op's cousins were doing this and some acquaintance's son had got that, and didn't I think about these things? How it wasn't a criticism, it was just a conversation. How she worried. I said, "Mum, I'm going home." She said, "Don't be dramatic." I said, "I'm not being dramatic. I've been here 3 days and I've been lectured about history and compared to Arnold, and I'm going home." She started to backtrack, said she hadn't meant it that way, said she just worried, said Arnold hadn't meant anything by it either. I was already in the spare room putting things in my bag. I said goodbye to Arlo. I told him his dinosaur drawing was excellent, which it genuinely was. I said goodbye to Tina, who looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, somewhere between understanding and worry, and something else I didn't have the name for. I drove home. The messages started within the hour. Mostly from my mother, some from Tina, one from Arnold, which was so carefully worded in the passive-aggressive register of someone who wants to land a point, without appearing to throw a punch, that I read it 3 times trying to locate the exact mechanism of it. I didn't respond to any of them for 2 days. Then Tina called. I picked up because she's my sister, and because whatever else is complicated, she's not the core problem, and I didn't want her to think I was disappearing. She said she thought I'd overreacted to the dinner conversation. She said Arnold hadn't meant anything by the history thing. She said he was just talking and I'd taken it personally. I was absorbing this and trying to find the fair version of a response when from somewhere in the background I heard Arnold say, and I want to be precise because the exact wording matters, that it was to be expected from someone who couldn't answer a basic question. From the background, while not being on the call. That specific maneuver, the background comment, the thing said within earshot of the phone that isn't technically directed at you, but is entirely directed at you, is the thing I have zero tolerance for. It's the coward's version of confrontation. Say the thing but not to the person. Be present enough to land it but absent enough to deny it. I said, "Put him on." Tina said, "Don't." I said, "Tina, put him on." She didn't, but he was clearly still there and could hear me, so I spoke to the room. I said, "You want to talk about education and qualifications and what people know. You got your job because your father died in it. That's compassionate recruitment. That's not a qualification. That's not something you earned by being the best candidate. It's a provision that exists for families in grief, and you're entitled to it, and you took it, and that's fine. But swinging it over people's heads like you built something from nothing when you had a safety net powerful enough to catch you regardless of your grades, that's not something you get to do. Not to me." The background went quiet. I said, "I'm sorry about your father. I mean that genuinely. But his death doesn't give you the right to question other people's education. One wrong answer to one question you lobbed at me while I was half asleep after dinner is not evidence of anything." Tina said my name. Her voice was doing something complicated. I said, "Whatever I built without a safety net. Everything I've done has been on my own. No backup plan, no provision if it fell apart. Just me and what I could make of what I had. That has a value your job doesn't have regardless of what either of us earns. That's not jealousy. That's just accurate." I said, "I'm going now." I hung up. I want to be honest with you about what happened after I said it. I sat with my phone in my hand and I felt the specific quality of having said something that cannot be unsaid. The compassionate recruitment line, the safety net, the father. I knew it was true. I knew it was accurate. I knew it was the thing that needed to be said in response to 2 years of accumulated comparison, and the background comment that was the specific straw that broke the specific camel's back. I also knew the timing was brutal. His father is gone. That grief is real regardless of how Arnold has used the position since. Connecting the death to the job in the middle of an argument, even accurately, even in direct response to being condescended to, lands in a place that has nothing to do with accuracy. I don't regret the content. I regret that it had to be said at all. I regret that 2 years of absorption led to a moment where that was the thing I reached for. I regret that it came out in a phone call rather than a conversation. I regret that Tina was in the middle of it. But I don't take it back. Because if I take it back, I'm saying the thing wasn't true and it was true. And I've been taking things back and absorbing things and managing my responses for 2 years, and this is where that led. The fallout has been significant. My mother has called 4 times. Each call has the same shape, starts with concern, moves to guilt, arrives at some version of he's had a hard life and you should apologize. I've listened to all 4. I've said the same thing to all 4, that I'm sorry about his father, that I'm not sorry about what I said. Arnold's passive-aggressive texts have been something to behold. The specific architecture of messages that are technically polite and entirely pointed. I have not responded to any of them. I don't think responding serves anything. Tina sent me one message. It said she was disappointed and that she needed time. I said I understood and that I loved her and that I was here when she was ready. She hasn't responded to that yet. Here's what I know sitting in my flat 3 days later. I've been doing this for 2 years, absorbing, managing, choosing the response that caused the least disruption rather than the response that was honest. Not because I'm a pushover, because I understood that Tina was happy and Arlo was small, and the family dynamic was what it was, and I could tolerate it in the doses I received it. What I didn't understand was that toleration at low doses is still accumulation. Every absorbed comment, every managed response, every time I filed something under not worth it today and moved on, it didn't disappear, it sat. And 2 years of sitting turned a 4-minute lecture about a history question into the conversation that produced the compassionate recruitment line. The dynamic was flawed from the beginning, not because Arnold is a bad person, because the family built a structure around his job that gave it a weight it was never supposed to have. Government employee became shorthand for success, became the measuring stick for everyone else, became the thing my mother used in comparisons, and Arnold used in lectures, and I was supposed to absorb without response, because that's just how the family worked. I understand now that how the family works is not the same as how I have to work. I packed the car on a Tuesday, drove home on a gray afternoon with the specific quiet of someone who has said something they can't take back and has decided they're okay with that. I passed a service station and stopped for coffee. I sat in the car park with a paper cup and I thought about the history question, the specific question I didn't know the answer to, the wrong answer I gave, the 4-minute lecture that followed. I thought about how many questions I've answered correctly that nobody noticed, how many things I've done without a safety net that nobody measured, how many accumulated silences I chose over how many accumulated truths. The coffee was bad. I drove the rest of the way home. So am I the a-hole? For leaving when I said I was leaving, for saying the compassionate recruitment line during the phone call, for not taking it back, for hanging up. The family says I was cruel and jealous and out of order. I say I was 2 years late. Probably both things are true. That's my position.
Hey dear listeners, this is Talks from the Net. Thanks for listening. If you like the content, then please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories. You can also find me on Spotify, Instagram, and Facebook too. See you on the next video.